Hello, and welcome to this evening's virtual event from Booksmith featuring Heather O'Neill and Starlee Kine to discuss Heather's new novel, When We Lost Our Heads, a brilliant new novel and a dazzling exploration of gender, sex, desire, class, and the terrifying power of the human heart when it can't let someone go. My name is Adam Schuhos, and I'm a bookseller and events host at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Massachusetts. Whether you know us well or this is your first time hearing our name, thank you so much for being part of our community today. And thank you so much for supporting an independent bookstore through your book purchases. And thank you for supporting the wonderful work of Heather O'Neill. Now, I first want to thank our moderator, Starlee Kine, for being here tonight. Starlee is an American public radio producer and writer. She is the creator and host of the podcast Mystery Show, which was done in production with Gimlet Media. Her other work has been featured on This American Life. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Starlee.
You're welcome.
And of course, our guest star for this evening, Heather O'Neill. Heather O'Neill is a novelist, poet, short story writer, screenwriter, and essayist. Lullabies for Little Criminals, her debut novel, was published in 2006 to international critical acclaim and was shortlisted for the Orange Prize for Fiction. Born and raised in Montreal, Heather now lives here today with her daughter. Lives there today with her daughter, excuse me, sorry. But it's a joy to say, please join me in welcoming Starlee Kine and Heather O'Neill.
These are some old bios of ours.
It's so nice to see you, Starlee. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. It's great to see you. I feel like when I was reading your book, it felt like I was seeing you already. So we're just continuing where I have just been mentally for the last couple of days.
I think I was trying to remember the first time we met, and I think it was on the Navy Pier. And I was with my daughter, who was 5 at the time, and I was afraid of heights, and she wanted to go on the Ferris wheel, and you were like, I will go with her. And I was like, who did I just let go up onto the Ferris wheel with my daughter? You must have been like 22.
I wish, yeah, I mean, I remember that was like the great try. I don't know if that was the first time we met in Chicago. We definitely met for the first time in Chicago. But when I took your daughter, we can say her name, right? She's like a renowned Canadian, right? Arizona Frances O'Neill. When I took her on our Navy Pier day, we had like a night where I took her on all the rides, and it was like the most fun a kid could have. Like I gave her the gift of the funnest night ever. And it was after This American Life taping. So like I had been working, and then we did this taping, and then I took her out. And then I remember the next week, you guys came to the taping, and I had to go out to dinner after. And I remember Arizona running down the hall into my arms because she was mine, because I'd given her this funnest night, and I had to go to dinner. And I remember the look on her face I just felt like I think about that look a lot, because it was like, I've never disappointed anyone more. I delivered. I was too good at it. I was too good at giving her the fun.
Well, anyways, here we are, decades later. We're all grown up. We've done many things.
Yeah. You've written a book. Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to write this book?
Well, it's been like 5 years since my last book. But what happened was I was working on another novel, which seemed like a great idea. And like, it was like, how could it go wrong? It was like this alien who was a sex addict. But the novel just like, it wouldn't manifest on the page. Like it just wasn't working. And my editor and I were working, and then we're on a phone call, and I was like, I'm going to throw it out. And I had this idea about doing a book set in the Victorian era, but the girls were all kind of these French Revolutionary characters. And I had written some little scenes from it that I just thought were wonderful. And then so we were like, let's just go for something completely new. And we started with this book. So I think from start to finish, it took 3 years.
Wow, that's really impressive. 3 years. It's a very substantial book. I mean, it's like Crime and Punishment.
They each get bigger. They each get kind of like more elaborate.
Yeah, but it's so breezy. For a big book, it is so breezy. Like you really can sink into it. And I feel like I found it really impressive. I always find your writing impressive, but how, considering it's long, how once you're in it, like you instantly get absorbed in it, but also so much happens. Like I wasn't expecting the changes that happen in it to happen. It's great. What do you I like what it says about female friendship a lot, and it's a subject I'm always endlessly fascinated by, and I love that it gets into this idea of when you are devoted and obsessed and enamored with someone, you also you have to stop them, and how, like, the feeling that makes you feel, the better that they are and the more that you covet who they are, the more it makes you feel a certain way about yourself. And I love that that's the engine that drives so much of this.
Yeah, I was interested, like there's so much about friendship and what kind of bonds people together that we don't talk about, because we have this sort of guise that friendship is this perfectly wonderful, supportive entity. But with any sort of really like passionate relationship, there's always there's this edge of darkness to it where you secretly want them dead, but you don't know why. And it's like you hate the dependency you have on them, you hate the hold they have, but they drive you to such better places, and you always have to kind of elevate yourself to keep up with them, and that can be tiring. So it's like, but that's the joy of it. It's all the people that drive you insane are the ones that you spend your life with, for better or worse, I find anyways.
And you could always, sorry.
No, go on.
Because you could always opt out. You could choose the other path. You could choose the people that don't make you feel like that you're less stimulated by, less interested in. That's the trade-off that comes with being interested in someone to such a degree.
Yeah, totally. But that's it. Like, it depends, because I've always found what I find most appealing in a friendship or a person is someone who just is going to open you up to this new world and just enhances all your possibility. And there's someone you can have like these conversations with that are actually philosophical discussions. And yeah, there's also a certain madness to it too, because when you have a great friendship, you kind of you also sort of enable, but you validate all their worst attributes too, because
yeah, it actually made me, I told a therapist that I got jealous of friends who I also loved very much, and she seemed so scandalized by it. And now I feel like I'm going to be marching in there bringing your book and be like, see, this, I'm normal, this is human nature.
I know, but it's particularly women are particularly not supposed to talk about this. And so much in the book, I just wanted to talk about these feelings that we have that are not only not supposed to talk, we're just not supposed to admit to having them. They make us somehow less feminine or less like whatever a woman is supposed to be. But it's such a half, like, it leaves us being so passive and receptive. And so I was just kind of interested in this, like, exploring the darker, dirtier parts of being a woman and trapped in this feminine body. But yeah, and because I love those parts, and I thought that they're wonderful, and like the sort of perverted desires and so many things like that.
Yeah, and I love that the book is so dedicated to being about women. Like, you keep thinking that I'm not like you keep thinking it maybe it's going to turn into a different kind of story, and then it's like, oh, now there are more women. Like, women are so interesting, and and it's exploring so many facets of being a woman, and this world populated so heavily by women's point of view is really actually quite unusual.
Yeah, it was, especially because in the Victorian times, and I was very specific when I started the book that I wanted it to center women. And the question of, there's so much like romance is always in every narrative kind of somehow co-ops the narrative. And then I was like, none of these women are going to get married, because also in the Victorian era, as soon as they get married, their lives are over, even like legally, professionally, just with agency, they belong to somebody else. And I was curious because I didn't even know when I started it what a narrative like that would look like and where it would go and how you could have, how the women would interact when you just took men out of the picture. And they act in glorious ways, because then they have that also all that energy that is spent on romance, they just invest it in each other and sort of creativity in their plotting, which is either, you know, wonderful plotting and evil plotting. And yeah, I was so fascinated where it would go, and I was happy where it was going. Like I was kind of excited as I was writing it to see how full a narrative could be without the romance.
And it's not, and the women, like there's desire there, but it's not, it doesn't turn into, it's also not, I feel like a lot of times when I see something that's about two women, it goes just to them becoming like lovers, you know, like that's, cause like, it's like the romance finds its way in one particular way over and over again in stories.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I was going to say, because I forget, what was the question? I lost it.
It wasn't really it was more like an observation, how I like that it keeps poking, it just keeps not doing the expected thing. It keeps not just being, it's really, really about relationships and the dynamic relationships between women that doesn't get reduced to, you take the men out and now two women are in love with each other.
Right. No, and it's also like the two main characters, Marie and Sadie, who are these two aristocrats who meet when they're 12, and they're just such peculiar girls, and they're so brilliant, but they're also narcissists. Like they would not be interested in that kind of relationship, because they're so they both adore themselves to such an incredible degree that in a way, like they love each other, but they're also madly in love with themselves, which is like they feel like they have this right, and they know it's kind of perverse, and it puts them outside of society to be that ambitious as young women and to kind of want to do whatever they want to the disregard of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
when you started, so you started with like vignettes, and you said you were excited to see where it went. When you write, what's your process normally? Was it different? And was it different for this one? How much did you have? I'm sorry, there's like 3 questions at once. You can answer in any order, anyone that strikes your fancy. But how much did you know of what this story, where it was going to go when you decided it was going to be a book? And how much was you discovering it?
So I think the first sort of development kind of went around, I had this idea of the French Revolution. So I had that as a scaffolding. So I was creating characters who, each one of them had just like a tiny drop, like a drop of inspiration from a character from the French Revolution, which was an era in history that I'd always been particularly fascinated by because of the class struggle and how it had changed our perception of class. So I was interested in doing that, but a revolution that involved women's rights with the same sort of philosophies, because at the end of the French Revolution, a lot of women's rights actually went backwards, and they weren't sort of included in whatever this definition of humans were. So I had a character based on Robespierre, one who was Mary Robespierre. I had one on George Danton. I had one on Jean-Paul Marais. And of course, like the 2 main ones were Marie Antoinette, who was Marie Antoine, and the Marquis de Sade, which is Sadie Arnett. And whenever I started kind of working scenes with those 2 together, because they were so opposite, I didn't even know they would be best friends, but they just became so interested in one another and they would just ignore the other characters. And I was like, well, this is obviously then the core of the novel, because every time I put them on the page together, they're so drawn to each other, and the way their opposites, kind of the opposite characteristics come together, seems so magnetic, and it just automatically, like whenever I started writing little drafts with them, they immediately started like murdering cats or to getting in duels. So I was like, obviously, like but I put two narcissists here. So of course they're like, listen, we're from the Golden Mile. We're the richest ones in this book. We're going to be the main characters. The other ones can try and get our attention however they want, but we're definitely the main characters. So
Wow.
all that all kind of worked out. Like, but I had that scaffolding of that kind of progress towards a revolution.
That's amazing to me that it didn't start, that the first seed wasn't these two best friends.
No, it wasn't actually. It was all
Wow.
the characters that I was playing with. But I'll often do that too. I just have different characters and you see which one is the most alive and kind of also has the most potential for change. I always think is the best protagonist. And yeah, so those two took over.
And then when you like had it, did the narrative structure, once you were like really had gotten into it or like had a draft, change? Like, is it the kind of book that you were constantly moving the pieces around, or once you had that and were off, it just kept unfurling?
Not at all, because it's so I was constantly moving it around. Also too, because there's two very distinct geographical locations in the novel. One is the Golden Mile, where all the incredibly rich factory owners live in Quebec, and the other is the Squalid Mile, where we have girls who are factory workers, brothels, like just down and out mothers. So it was how to kind of, one of the perplexing questions about writing was how to make sure that both areas were alive and the character, and like when they would be introduced, and how you kind of, when you have two simultaneous plots going on and then they kind of meet and merge. And so when you have to go back and forth with anything, and it's like, how do you do that without losing the tension from the other scenes, and like pop into the Squalid Mile at just the right times. And so it gives the little hint of what they're going to get to, and then you really kind of get down there when Sadie moves to this to the Squalid Mile, like up to the Golden Mile, then it's just like, then you're in a completely different world. We're down in the Squalid Mile and things are wild.
Which is like halfway through the book. Like that, it's surprising to have that change come halfway through after you've read a substantial amount, and to still realize how much the world's going to open up. And I do think the way you, especially the way you introduced the other new characters before that, it doesn't feel like the kind of novel that's like, now we're this person, now we're hearing from this person, now we're hearing from that person. Like, you actually are not quite aware of the book switching around into before that, in a good way. Like, it's all so like woven together.
Yeah, and that took a lot of work, like placing around and like moving things. And some scenes it's like it starts and then it moves back. So yeah, it's all very arduous, technical, like you just end up like weeping, but then like just at the end it looks effortless. As a reader, you should not think about those things as a reader. You go through.
No, it's full immersion. Do you like that part of writing? Do you like that stage of it? Aspect.
I do. I generally like, I give my books to my editor quite early because I just like to immediately start working on it and seeing what's wrong. And I like the second draft, because the second draft is like when you have feedback and input, and then you know where it's going. Like sometimes with the first draft, you're so clueless, and you're just in this world and you haven't quite figured out the themes or the story. And sometimes you can just write for a week and you've gone off on some strange tangent or some character and you're just like, no, that's totally wrong. So it gets thrown out. So kind of the first draft with all the investigation and the getting lost, that I find that I find really difficult. At least a second draft, you like have an idea and you've spoken to someone, you're like, what do you think the themes are? I think themes are this. And I always find once I find the theme of a novel and sort of what it's about, then that even more than a plot kind of structures what happens, because every kind of scene has to speak to that theme.
Yeah. I very much, when the scenes of Sadie writing and like just always with her notebook and the way that even the words come onto the page very much reminds me of my memories of watching you write in your notebook and always having something. Do you know what, I mean, I feel like I know some of the themes. What are the main themes to you?
I guess the main thing, I think what I was doing in a way, I was really interested in unexplored aspects of the female identity. And I was also very much interested in a lot of the contemporary conversations we're having about feminism and gender and all these things I've been pondering and were just part of what I think about and read about every day. And I was interested in kind of putting that in a Victorian context and how that would read, because the gender roles were so incredibly like just didactic back then and just rigorous, and you would have people would just buy books and they would tell you how to behave as a girl, even from anything as simple. It's like, okay, you move your hair like this, that, no too much, or like how loud you should laugh at a dinner party, and make sure you don't, I mean, all the books tell you don't laugh particularly loud because that will, that's upsetting, especially to men, to hear women laughing, because it just shows that you're out of control with your femininity. So I was interested in putting it in that context, and I thought it would be so fun to have those women kind of struggling against the gender roles, and also and just the kind of the metaphors from the Victorian era to kind of deal with that. Like one of the original ideas that why I was so interested in that time period was I kept finding pictures and collecting pictures of women in crinolines that go under the dress, and women were like literally put into these cages, and there was something about it that just kept pulling at me, and it was like I have to like create the lives of a group of these women living in cages and how they express themselves within those cages.
The crinoline and the dresses definitely feel like characters in the book. Like they're very vivid, they're very alive, they're
tricky. They're throwing women downstairs, setting them on fire. Yeah,
they're trapped inside them. They can be covered in blood. They're very, you picture them. I mean, they're very much a part of it.
And there's so many layers. They wore so many layers. Even when you do the undergarments, there's like 7 or 8 layers. And then you're like, to get at desire, to have sex, there's just so many layers to get off in the trappings. And sort of the more wealthy you are, the more layers it is that a man or another one has to somehow penetrate. But and
all the way that it signals class.
Yeah, totally. But but it's weird. It's also it's kind of funny too, because there's so much with the book that's the different sensations. Like when I was reading up on that time period, like the hygiene was so odd, and compared to now, we're just so clean. Especially after we're gonna get out of COVID, we're just like going to be fanatically clean. Yeah. But then you read about their hygiene and just it was like wash. Just have a hole in your bloomers and wash once a month. Like, how do these people even have sex? I'm like, I just have to like, when I visualize the sex scenes, it's like they are used to that sort of filth and the way humans smell, which would be a totally different from how we would perceive it. I don't know how I got into that weird tangent.
No, well, did you like? I was wondering while reading. So you did a lot of research about that time, because it's the world of it matches so much with what I know you to be interested in, and also just how your mind works. And so I was reading it being like, I could totally see I could imagine a scenario where Heather didn't pick up a single bit of research and got it right. Because it is such a Heather world as it is.
Yeah, I know exactly what, yeah, because it's like whenever you choose a time period, it's always been something that you've kind of been interested in. And I also like that idea of people who kind of, some artists who have played with different times, but it's always still very modern, like Edward Gorey, everything's Edwardian, but he's not an Edwardian figure. He just kind of, but he creates in that, in Wes Anderson does it too, where it's like, yes, it's in World War II or the 60s, but really it's just, you're just in Wes Anderson world. So this is definitely in that way. Like I did feel like it's definitely like a Heather O'Neill joint, like just, it's all my aesthetic and people moving around, but it's like almost my characters escaped. I just threw them in this Victorian setting and they're like, we can handle this. We can do this. We can play this game. We can do this play.
And you discovered you've been living in a Victorian world this whole time. Because it doesn't feel forced at all. It doesn't feel like you're being like your language onto this world. But at the same time, it feels almost entirely created. Like when the stuff with the laughing, I thought that was a mention that you had come up with. I didn't realize that was actually in books.
Yeah, it's so it's like a combination, because also when you do research, it's like you're researching not like, it's not like a historical like when some people take a true event and want it to stay exact, like as true to the grittiness as possible, but it's more like when I'm researching, I'm looking for things that inspire me. So there's like whole, I'll just go through it like a huge, I have to, especially for the Squalid Mile, because it just doesn't exist anymore. And it was such an impoverished neighborhood, it's very hard to find sort of historical references, but you just kind of go through things and then all of a sudden you'll find a detail you're like, I'm taking that detail for my book. Like that women couldn't laugh, that's perfect. Or just little details. And then I read that in that time period and place, if you had a baby, the survival rate was 50%. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then it's like, it's tragic very much, but it would so change the way everyone perceived babies, and the idea that once you have a baby, you're going to have it for life. It was like for a time period, like little babies come and they are these strange little elfin things that may or may not choose to stay in this world.
And what I liked about it feels like it doesn't feel like you took like the way we feel now and like folded, like there's stuff that we have learned about like women that you can then put over into the past. It felt more like the past informed what we have now discovered in our present day. Like it very much feels of its time, while also being like, oh, look how much this matches up with where we are today.
Yeah, it definitely goes like back and forth in that way.
Yeah.
So
I think power would be a theme.
Oh yeah, definitely, like power, and and it was also power in the context of feminism and the question of like, what do women do now that we have this power? And it was there's like a critique of lean in girl boss feminism. It's like, okay, so if you get this power, are you just supposed to then relish being at the top and act like the men and just kind of continue this oppressive behavior? But it's like, oh wow, women can be oppressors too now. Isn't the world wonderful? But it's like the sort of the original goals of feminism, which can dismantle the patriarchy. So it's this idea that what are women going to like, particularly because the power comes to different women first. It comes to white women first. It comes to women who are in upper classes first. And then how do you continue with the revolution and bring everybody up with you, or you just kind of tune it out, the world, which is Marie does, but she's based on Marie Antoinette. She's a very corrupted character.
Yeah. And you always like when Marie does, I'm constantly, I feel like the big question is this the only way to have power? Like, because it feels like every time someone gets power, they adopt the ways of the people who had power before, which were men, and then and they think they're told the only way to hold on to that power is to be ruthless and unkind and do it exactly the way that was done before. And no one's willing to do the experiment of being like, who says this is true? Who's like, we have to test out this other way instead of following the footsteps of these people who have gotten us where we are today, which is not good. So when she went down that path, I was like, once again, we'll never know.
Yeah, and that's why she has this army of little tiny girls coming for her up the hill. And for me, the character who's constantly questioning that is the character of George, who is, I guess, the moral center of the novel. It's funny now that people are reading it, whenever people say to me that George is their favorite character, I'm like, oh, you must be a really good person. And then other people, I like Sadie. I just want to be like, I'm just Sadie. And I'm like, I must take a note to be wary of you. But there's something like George is the one who kind of is able to see all that sort of perspective.
Isn't it because George is the one who wasn't beautiful, so is able to see outside the power dynamics set by beautiful women and men who run everything?
Yeah, totally. That's one of the aspects of it. It's she's this genderqueer character who has no interest. She just doesn't have that predisposition to presenting as a woman in that way. And yeah, she's just born. She's like this orphan who was abandoned in a brothel, and she's just raised by all the different prostitutes, and I have her being passed from one breast to the other. So she she just knows women in this different way. And that's the madame is always like, this baby is so ugly that she's gonna, then she's like, counterintuitively, this little scrawny baby that refuses to die is going to have this incredible power just by not being objectively beautiful like everybody else in this joint. And people are going to react to her in a different way, and she's just going to have to find all these skill sets to survive, which she does.
Yeah. And I find it, and the characters are constantly discovering scenarios where they thought they had power and didn't. Thought like interpersonally, when they feel bad, it's because they realize that something had power, a person had power over them, and then they crave it, or it's so rarely equal, the footing between the people matched together.
Yeah, like the power imbalances. Yeah, and I think that kind of, it happens in real life too, where we don't realize the sort of power someone has over us until we trust people and then they betray us. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but it's like you just don't realize. Sometimes people are holding their cards but they're building up a little deceptive power thing to
and like just
usurp you, I think. I don't know which characters are you taught, what dynamic?
Well, all of it, like, because it's like Sadie and Marie are like so evenly matched with their skills and their beauty, but at the beginning, Marie has money, and so she can't be thrust out the way that Sadie can't. Like, Sadie's way more vulnerable because she doesn't actually have the power in society, so that makes you like. So I feel like those two are constantly trying to outmatch each other and come up with new ways to show that the other one can't leave them or they can't be left. And it's and then when Sadie meets George, there's that relief of being like, oh, there's something missing. I'm not worried about, like, when they first meet, there's not like this power struggle of having to prove your worth in ways like the way that Sadie had to be like better at all times than Marie.
Yeah, but then you see that she's very equal with Marie, so she can never have the upper hand. But then when she meets somebody who just adores her and is really nice to her, she just walks all over her, because that's the way human beings are. Like with any relationship, it's a power struggle in a way, unless someone wants to accept the sort of different, like a more passive role, or not the less dominant role.
But that's also, yeah, but that's even, right, exactly. I guess, right. Well, you even say, if like when they do the poem, if someone had, if a winner had been declared, everything would have been done with, because one of them would have accepted the passive role. But when it's still out, up for grabs, the power struggle continues. I just think I think in the framework of power overall in our world, you're constantly feeling like you have to be reminded of your lack of power, have power over someone, and you can never quite relax because you're always afraid of being sent away, not able to stay, and not able to get the things that the other person has.
I know, it's all relationships are impossible.
They are.
Like, but we're, as human beings, we couple in all sorts of ways, and we love that intimacy of just the way you can engage with like another person, but they're just so complicated and they're never at peace.
That's what's so wonderful about reading the book, though, because you're constantly feeling that. You're constantly like understanding why people come together over and over, why they can't stay away from each other.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite character?
Oh, it's really impossible for me to say. That's an interesting question. Because I'm like the mother, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but
the mothers in your books do.
Totally do. I'm gonna say the one that, I guess if I'm honest, the one I related to the most is probably Sadie, who I've just told everyone to watch out for, people who like Sadie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that sort of, I think it's the writing, because Sadie is the writer, and so much of the way Sadie writes, like every time I describe Sadie writing, when her pen goes onto the page, like the ink, it just becomes ribbons or birds or like a tangled forest on the page. Because I'm just so obsessed with writing and the act of I can never get over it. There's something, the physicality of it, just the thrill of it when I sit down and this ink comes out of my page, and it's just a perverse delight that I have, and Sadie had that too. So and just her interest in that when she discovers the pornography, and then it was very similar, because she goes on, for those who haven't read the book, to become this great renowned, or infamous, if you will, pornographer. And there's a scene when she's like 12 years old and she finds this hidden book of pornography, and it kind of mirrored back when I was a kid. There were, in this building that I lived, there was a book hoarder, and just there were books that went right up to his ceiling, and he would build little nests. But for whatever reason, he would leave these Victorian pornographic books on the stairs. Like, I don't know who they were for, like, just, it was sort of, this is just what he did. Whenever he had a pornographic book, he would put them outside his door. So I would pick them up and read them, and they were so unusual. And the idea that the written word could actually not only create beauty and just change your opinion and drive you to action, but it could also just turn you on physically. And then I was like, my God, words can do anything. They can just like seize you and make love to you. So there was a similar, and that sort of interest in what sex does in literature, and how using sort of that Sadian idea of the philosophy of the bedroom, and what, when you use sex to examine philosophical questions in literature, I was always so fascinated by that. So yeah, I guess, I don't know if she's my favorite, but she's definitely the one that I worked on the hardest too, because she was difficult to make her, I'm not going to use the word likable, because I don't use unlikable or likable, but just to make to delight the reader, so that the reader still wanted to really engage with Sadie and follow her story. But it was difficult because she has these psychopathic, murderous tendencies. And when you meet her, she's this macabre little child who writes, who's just, the only time she talks to other children is when she does their eulogies for their dead pets, and she just does this crazy stuff. So it was within that, it was like a lot of work to make a a character. And also I was basing her on probably the most disgusting, this incredibly revolting historical figure. And so how do I deal with his impulses and views and kind of work them into feminism? So it was a complicated character to create. So I think, and whatever, but that's it too, whatever, like, whatever you end up working on a lot, you just end up liking because you're proud of. So I was kind of proud that I finally made Sadie into something that was not just a character who was grotesque. Because even my editor was, for a long time, she was like, "Oh, Sadie, she's horrible," and I was like, "Okay, no, I don't want that. I want everyone to like adore Sadie, nonetheless, despite all their like rational impulses." So I worked a lot on making her really this attachant thing. These are my truckers.
Yeah. Well, are those a trucker convoy?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's wow. That's ripped from the headlines right there. I felt, like it feels like she's not like Wednesday Addams or something, like she's definitely has so much dimension to her. And to me, her grotesqueness, all her impulses are so rooted in, feeling unloved and misunderstood. And I find her quite easy to root for. Like, I find her need to get her gross impulses out very, I know this dog, I'm afraid to let him go because I don't want him to howl. She's so physical, like what she's feeling inside, the way it comes out of her and through writing, like the fact that writing is such a key. When Marie is so upset when she tells Sadie's mom about where the journal is, about where the notebook is, and she's like, I've just given her the key to Sadie's mind, and like the power of that. And then the family, of course, doesn't cherish that, but you really understand how powerful what's going on inside someone like Sadie can be, and how it could wreak havoc on the world, but also the forces behind what has made those feelings like that.
Yeah, and it's also the question of how does Sadie she's such an aristocrat too, and how does she fit into the revolution? And that was a bit from, I was always fascinated with the idea of the Marquis de Sade, he was kind of liberated from the Bastille in the French Revolution, and the French revolutionaries were like, they really liked his skills. He was such a great speaker, such a great writer. So they were like, oh, come and you'll give speeches for us and whatnot, which, he did to a degree, but then it just became like, how do we even deal with the fact that this man has worse aristocratic, disgusting behavior than any of the people we've cut their heads off. So I was interested in that. And I'm even thinking of writing sort of a nonfiction book on the idea of problematic artists and what we do with their work. And he's sort of, he's one he's just incredibly problematic, of course. It's hard to find someone more problematic, but his work has had such an influence on avant-garde, has had a huge impact on feminists, like from Simone de Beauvoir to Angela Carter. So how do we reconcile that? And then I was like, how do we reconcile Sadie's drive to be an artist and all her, she is true to herself. Of all the characters, she's so true to her vision, and she doesn't care if she ends up in prison, like anything, exiled. She just wants to be herself. Yeah. And but then how do we reconcile that with, like, those are good impulses, but there's also, Sadie's also bad. So I wanted her to be a really problematic character.
Yeah, and like, I feel like forcing people to hold both those things is very good. Like that's what I feel like the goal in general right now is to stop reducing everything to one thing. And so I felt like how Sadie kept it was very subtle. It was very subtle when something like vulnerable was revealed inside Sadie, and it never felt like a betrayal or a cheap trick. to be like, now you like Sadie, even though she, killed a cat.
Yeah. And it wasn't like when I kind of dealt with the world she grew up in, that made her kind of dark. Like she was just really neglected as a child. But it's not like have people been talking about the trauma plot where it's like this one thing that bad happened that to Sadie that kind of created her entire personality. It's more that she was living in a household, I think that was and it's almost like she kind of created it because she refused to be this Victorian little girl for her mother. She just insisted on being this melancholic seer or whatever she is. And then she meets Marie, and Marie like gets it right away, the potential of this girl, and they just become hopelessly fascinated with each other.
Yeah, and I like that you don't know who didn't love each other first. Whether Sadie didn't love her mom first or her mom didn't love her. Like her family sucks because they kiss up to everyone and they're social climbers and they don't value the stuff that she stuff that she finds interesting. But not knowing who neglected first, a mother or child, it's good. Never, you never can quite. You can never, even when you go as far back to her birth, you can't boil it down to that wound.
Yeah, and she's complicated. As if you had a child and the child came home with a report card with all A's on it, but also they're like, I've murdered the family cat. And so how do you deal with a child like that? Yeah.
And she does not make it easy on herself. Like she's so herself that she gets herself she makes life very hard on herself because of that, how adamant she is.
Yeah, she refuses to but she just has this new idea of what it is. And I think that's what the book is kind of set in that period too, because it was just that emergence of all these feminist ideas, and it was right before the first wave of feminism, where all these ideas were being cooked up and articulated, and the different women, they have these innate beliefs, but they haven't been spoken to, and there haven't been there's just starting to be writings about it. So when they're young, they're like, I have these impulses, and I feel this way towards sex, and I feel this way towards being and ambition, but everybody says I'm not supposed to be them. So they each kind of hold on to this innate sense of who they are.
And feeling the weight of an idea. Like the book, Marie and her dad go and look at all the inventions. It's we go to the factories, the industrial age changing everything, making humans submissive to these machines. And then you can really feel that when these women discovering how radical just ideas alone can be is very exciting. Them not even knowing that ideas could have power.
Yeah, and they're at the cusp of the 20th century, which is like the century where so many ideas were kind of put into practice and had either incredible results, but also the most catastrophic results. So I was very interested in that and the power of the text. And the French Revolution began all with just people trying to put the Enlightenment thinkers' ideas into practice. And you have this massive bloodbath and baskets full of heads. But it's so.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's like it's like it takes place in a time when ideas themselves, before they're even put into action, just the idea of having an idea sitting in front of you or hearing it for the first time, it gets people thinking a different way, and then the next thing it leads to is all this change and all this.
Of course, that's why fascists come in historically, and tyrants. They've immediately gone, and if they've occupied a place, they immediately go and kill the writers.
Yeah,
that those are the most dangerous people. Like, never mind military. Like, first, let's get rid of the writers. So line them up and shoot them, because the power of the text can be so revolutionary.
Yeah. You should write that book about the problematic artists.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But then you're like, oh my God, it's problematic. It's problematic to write about problematic stuff. So it's interesting. So
Well, of
yeah,
course,
and that's
yeah.
also something where it's like, that's the most interesting, when I have an idea for an essay or a book, what it's always propels me on is the idea that I don't know where it would go. Like, I don't know what to think about this. So it's interesting just to, well, will take me 100,000 words and then I'll be able to come up with some idea of how to think about this and how to accept this.
I think and that really does, you really, really do feel that in your writing. And so that's why I liked reading so much about Sadie, the actual act of her writing and all the ways you describe writing, because it feels like that. It's fun to be reading a book and feeling the feelings of all the way that words are described. You are inside of while reading one of your books, and you can feel, my favorite things are things that feel very active, and you can tell that it didn't start off as like a complete thing. Like you having to poke around and discover, very much informs the reading experience, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, and because writing is different than thinking, it just kind of allows a thought to go to the strange places. Like you can't just do it in your head, but if you're writing, and then it's like, not only does it go far, but then the joy too is like, there is the line, and you're like, I'm gonna do it. It's going over the line and see what's over there. So
yeah, it's very thrilling. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to stop for these Q&As. Am I supposed to?
I didn't want to interrupt you guys.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, there's no questions right now.
Oh, so, never mind then.
Yeah, but so if anybody has any questions, we do have 5 minutes left, and we can definitely. I'm sure Heather would love to answer a couple of your questions. So while you guys think of some questions, I have a question of my own for you, Heather. Just I have to ask as a bookseller. So everybody out there who reads your book and just absolutely loves it, and they want more, like what would you suggest that they read next?
I guess if they finish When We Lost Our Heads.
And they want something, just
more from me.
Yeah, or anything. Recommendations from an author herself.
You know what I would suggest? Like Starlee's, like if anybody hasn't listened to the mystery show, because I was discussing it even on Twitter the other day, just the way it's so peculiar, the way you shape narrative. And like you listen, it's this podcast. You can get it anywhere, I suppose. Where do you get it? Anywhere.
Yeah. Don't get it on Spotify. Let's just
anywhere but Spotify.
Let's stop that already. But yeah,
it's these interviews, and she goes after these peculiar mysteries. Like one of them is to find out how tall Jake Gyllenhaal is. But then it's just everybody in New York starts following Jake Gyllenhaal around and accosting him in restaurants, and he doesn't understand it. But there's these wonderful human interactions, and at the end, you're like, it seems so strangely all over the place. And then it's like, that was perfect narrative. Like, it's just, everything was so essential, and you don't see it till the end. So I would suggest listening to, Mystery Show, because it's just it's the writing in it. It's so wonderful.
Thank you. I mean, I feel that's why the way you're talking about your writing is very much what I seek out when I'm trying to I get bored very easily if I know too much. Like that, it's pretty literal. Mystery Show, I don't know the answer to the mystery, and it's also very hard because if I can't solve it, I have a story I can't actually put out. But I feel like you can really feel the difference when you hear or read a story that is built on discovery.
We got a couple of questions have come in. We got one that got a couple of upvotes here. I'm totally going to mess up this name, but Nens Corbier says, hi all. Heather, have you considered performing your audiobooks yourself? You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. I always try and convince them of this, but they don't. They're like, no. I don't know why. I always want to read my own audiobooks, but there's something, they're just like, it's a whole skill and a pacing, or maybe they probably have had, I assume, because their reaction is so adamant against writers reading novels, that I'm assuming a lot of novelists must go into the little booth and lose their minds after the first day. But this audiobook is yeah, it's just a beautiful, like, it's a skill. So
I think,
but I would like to read it.
I
But
think
they
they
won't
should I think they should let you read it. I'm objecting to whatever I think there's something else going on. I think is it like, who reads your book? Hillary Clinton or somebody? Who is it, a famous person?
Yeah, it was this wonderful, the one who did, it's someone different every time. The one who did it this time, she also did the Elena Ferrante novels. So she's just a master. I listened to it. It's an incredible job. I don't know if I'd be able to compare, like, even the dialogue, when they do dialogue and she does like the different voices. I can still do it, but I don't know.
I think they should try. I think the next one they should give you a shot.
I'll be like, Starlee, I was in there for 2 hours and I'm like, out. What do I do now? It's all.
Yeah, but then it's just like 2 hours of audio that they don't use. There's like literally no risk. There's no risk to this proposition.
Sounds like it'd be
All
fun.
Yeah, I'm putting it on record. I'm being Sadie. I'm being a problematic, difficult, revolutionary, pornographic woman.
We got from Jessica Hamilton. When you're writing, do you think of your reader and wonder how digestible it will be to them, or have doubts about going to darker places?
Well, it's interesting. I've worked with it depends. Like, I usually think of, I leave it to my editors usually. So yeah, I try not to censor myself, and whatever's good for me, and then I'll give it to my editors and they'll say if I've gone too far, because I don't want to put that line on myself. I mean, I do have like an innate sense. I'm like, this is just gratuitous and whatever, but what was the question? How do I stop it? Yeah, I just like to be free on the page, and then I like that I'll let somebody else to tell me I've gone too far.
Gotcha. No, yeah, that was a question. We got a couple more, but unfortunately we only have time for probably one more. I'm sorry. From Arizona O'Neill. If you need to look out for people who love Sadie most and people whose favorite is George is a good person, what about people who love Marie?
Good question, Arizona.
For horoscopes? What do I say for someone who loves Marie? Marie is like, I think Marie is such a wonderful person. I think Marie is someone who's really, she has some she's pushed up against the world. Like, the world comes for her, and she's warned when she's little because she's going to inherit all this stuff. And there's this one factory owner in Philadelphia or whatever who just tells her, like, when you come into your whatever you get, people are going to come for it, and they do come for it, and everybody comes for it, and it makes her something she probably might not have been, but it just definitely hardens her. So I think probably if you love Marie, you probably love who she actually is before the world came up against her.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, the question seems like, when do you love the people who love Marie? Do they love her? Which Marie do they love? Yeah,
because there's some parts where it's very hard to love Marie. But maybe it shows. I'd say if someone loves Marie like all the way through, I would think it was someone who is really able to look at human beings and see their essential selves outside of their context. But does such a thing exist? Who knows? But I would say this person probably, it's like reading tarot cards. I would say this person has like an interest in someone's humanity, no matter what.
Nice. We actually have a couple other really good questions. Do you mind going a little bit late to answer a few of these?
No, go ahead. Oh, it was asked. If it's okay with Starlee.
I'm fine. Yeah.
From Nicholas Giardini, funny to mention Elena Ferrante. I was thinking about your books when I recently read My Brilliant Friend. How common do you think it is for two people to be bound together throughout their lives?
I don't think it's that common, because I think we go through phases. So I mean, we have so many and as you get older, you kind of realize just how many chapters you have in your life. and how they can be so radically different. So it depends. So for me, I'm always have these different chapters and brand new people in my life, but I don't think it's entirely that common to have someone you're that passionate about from when you're 12. So and then I think because we have, one of the things that was kind of a commentary on was when we're young and we're girls, we have these friendships, we're not really told to value them and to hold them, and that's something that you can build on, and it can be a fulfilling life partnership. Whereas I think little boys are taught, you have your circle of old boyfriend, like, old boys clubs and whatnot, and these men you will meet in the real world. But with women, we're kind of not taught that as children. So I think I wanted to, it's such a fascinating thing to girls who have a friendship through their whole lives and what that passion would be. And I don't know. I haven't done any studies, but I don't think it's that common.
And our last question here from an anonymous attendee. Hello, this has been such a pleasure to listen to. Heather, was Marie's mansion based off a specific mansion in the Golden Square Mile?
It wasn't exactly like I decided to build my own, but I had gone up there and like, I've passed that on that road, like, innumerable times from my whole life. And I've always been in love with those crazy Victorian mansions. So I built my own, but there was a couple like that. I forget what it's called. This Lady Something's house that McGill owns. It's fantastic. So there's just a bunch of them. So I kind of went up there and it was like, I have to build one that's somehow better than all of these. And there was a couple that I had actually researched that had been torn down in the 60s. And there's one, I forget. So no, it's not actually a specific one.
Nice. Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on. Is there another?
No.
Did you have a Marie and Sadie when you were 12 kind of friendship?
Yeah, I think when I was 13 or 14, and I met a girl in my class, and she was the new kid. So obviously she already had this aura, but her name was Sabrina. And she just came like to school wearing a Napoleonic hat, like a tri-cornered hat, and probably like so much. And I would just fell madly, madly in love with her. Cause I was like, who, and she just didn't care. And it was, like the 80s, everybody kind of dressed the same. And I was like, who is this girl who not only on top of being new has decided to wear a hat like Napoleon on the first day? So we just became like brilliant, like immediately. It was like a coup foudre. I was like, who are you? And I want to know everything you know. And she knew all sorts of peculiar things. And she was like, and then one of the first things she said, she was like, I actually in my past life, I was Sarah Bernhardt. I was like, that's fantastic. This girl's fantastic.
It's such a rite of passage of being a girl. I feel like I do think it's so. I don't know boys. It seems so particular to being a girl, having such an. I've never met. I don't think I've ever. If I ever meet any women I've ever met who has not had that at some point in their life, I can't trust and can't relate to, and they're just aliens to me.
Awesome. Hey, I'm so sorry that we're out of time. I could listen to this talk for like another 2 hours. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you both so much for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for hosting, and thank you, Starlee.
Oh yeah, it was great.
I'm sorry we had to do it virtually, but like you'll just have to write another book and then come to the Booksmith and do an in-person event when things are safe. And
just write another 500-page book.
Nice. Well, everybody out there, thank you so much for coming tonight. If you don't yet have a copy of Heather's book, you can go to the Eventbrite page where you registered for this event and get a copy there. You can go to our online store at brooklinebooksmith.com or just come on into the store. We are definitely going to have plenty of copies for you. So again, thank you all, and thank you, Heather and Starlee, so much.